There is no light in a tomb. Not the absence of light, you know. Not a closed eye, not a dark room with a door under it. This is a darkness with weight, a darkness that presses into the ears and the mouth and settles into the folds of linen wrapped tight around a man's hands, his feet, his face. 4 days. That is how long Lazarus of Bethany had been wrapped in that silence. Outside, the stone that sealed his tomb had already grown warm under the sun and cold under the night 4 times over. Inside, nothing moved, nothing breathed. And yet, Scripture tells us something stranger than silence was coming. Something that would make a grown man weep before he ever spoke a word of power. Jesus wept. 2 words. The shortest verse in all of Scripture, John 11:35, and maybe the most human. Before this story ends, you will understand why those 2 words matter more than almost anything else Jesus ever said. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand how Lazarus came to be sealed in that tomb, and what it meant when his name was finally spoken into that darkness, we have to go back to a house in Bethany and 2 sisters who loved their brother more than they feared what would happen if they lost him. Bethany was a small village just under 2 miles from Jerusalem, close enough to smell the smoke of the temple sacrifices on a still evening, far enough to feel like its own world. And in that village lived 3 people who Scripture tells us Jesus loved deeply: Martha, her sister Mary, and their brother Lazarus. This wasn't a passing friendship. John's Gospel is careful to tell us this. In John 11:5, it says plainly, "Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus." Whenever Jesus came near Jerusalem, this was the house he stayed in. This was the family he trusted enough to be tired in front of, to eat at their table without performing. Martha, practical and often overwhelmed by hosting. You might remember her from another story, fretting over the meal while her sister sat at Jesus' feet. Mary, quieter, the one who would later anoint his feet with expensive perfume and wipe them with her hair, an act of devotion so strange and intimate that it stopped a room full of grown men mid-conversation. And Lazarus, Scripture gives him almost no words of his own. We don't know what he sounded like, what he joked about, what kind of brother he was. And yet he is one of the only people in the entire Bible that the text tells us, twice, that Jesus specifically loved. So when Lazarus grew sick, a sickness that came on hard and fast, the kind that makes a household go quiet, the sisters didn't panic alone. They did what anyone would do for someone they loved, and Jesus loved too. They sent word, "Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick." That's all the message said. They didn't beg. They didn't demand he come immediately. They simply told him, trusting that love, once informed, would act. And here is where the story takes its first hard turn, because Jesus didn't come. He received the message. Scripture is explicit about that. And then he stayed where he was 2 more days. Put yourself in that house for a moment. You've sent word to the one person who has healed lepers, opened blind eyes, calmed a sea with his voice. You know what he's capable of. And you wait. 1 day, then another, and no one comes. We aren't told what those 2 days felt like inside that house, but we don't need to be told. Anyone who has ever waited by a phone or a doorway or a hospital corridor already knows exactly what that waiting does to a person. It doesn't just test your patience, it tests what you actually believe about the one you're waiting on. John's Gospel gives us Jesus' reasoning, spoken to his disciples before they even set out. This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. It's a strange, almost unsettling thing to say about a friend who is suffering. But notice what the text says next, and pay attention here because it's easy to miss. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. When he had heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. The love and the delay are placed side by side, deliberately, in the same breath. Not despite the love, connected to it. Whatever was happening, it was not indifference. It was something the sisters could not yet see the shape of. By the time Jesus finally said to his disciples, "Let us go into Judea again," Lazarus was already dead. Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. Not sleeping, not fading, dead. And he said it, Scripture tells us, so that they would believe. The disciples were afraid to go. The last time Jesus was near Jerusalem, the religious leaders had tried to stone him. Thomas, often remembered only for his doubt later on, said something quietly brave in that moment. "Let us also go, that we may die with him." He didn't understand what was coming. None of them did. But he was willing to walk toward it anyway. By the time they arrived in Bethany, Lazarus had been in the tomb 4 days.
4 days meant something specific in that culture, and the original audience of this gospel would have understood it instantly, even if we don't. There was a belief, common at the time, that a person's spirit lingered near the body for 3 days after death. A lingering hope, however faint, that something might still change. By the 4th day, that hope was considered gone. The body was truly, finally, irreversibly dead. Martha heard that Jesus was coming, and she didn't wait in the house. She went out to meet him on the road, leaving Mary behind in her grief, surrounded by mourners who had come to sit with the family. Because that was the custom, to not let sorrow be carried alone. And when Martha reached him, what she said wasn't polite. It wasn't rehearsed comfort. It was the truth of a woman who had spent 4 days turning one sentence over and over in her mind. "Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died." There it is. Not an accusation exactly, but not far from one either. Grief and faith tangled together in a single breath. And then, almost as if she catches herself, she adds something remarkable. "But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee." She doesn't fully know what she's asking for. She isn't expecting a resurrection, not yet. But some part of her still hopes. Jesus answers her plainly, "Thy brother shall rise again." Martha responds the way any grieving person raised in her faith would, with the doctrine she'd been taught since childhood. "I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day." A future hope. Distant. True but far away. The kind of comfort that feels true in your head and does nothing for the ache in your chest. And this is the moment the whole story turns on its hinge. Jesus doesn't correct her theology. He redefines the entire category she's thinking in. "I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this?" Not a resurrection is coming, someday, eventually. I am the resurrection. Present tense. Standing on the road in front of her, dust on his sandals from the walk. Martha's answer is one of the great confessions of faith in all of Scripture, given not in a moment of triumph, but in the middle of raw grief, before she had seen a single thing proven. "Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world." Then she went and called her sister. Mary came quickly when she heard. The mourners in the house, assuming she was going to the tomb to weep there, followed her out. And when she reached Jesus, she fell at his feet. The same posture, the commentators note. in which she once sat to listen to him teach. Now she falls there in collapse, not devotion. And she says the exact same words her sister had said, word for word. "Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died." The same sentence. But where Martha followed hers with theology, Mary offers nothing else. Just weeping, just the sentence, and the collapse, and the tears. And this is where Scripture gives us something almost too tender to fully explain. John records that when Jesus saw Mary weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. The Greek language used here is intense. It suggests something closer to a shudder, an inward anguish, not calm composure. This was not a man performing grief for the crowd. Something in him broke open at the sight of her sorrow. He asked where they had laid him. They said, "Lord, come and see." And then, the shortest verse in the Bible. Two words that somehow hold the weight of the entire gospel inside them. Jesus wept. Think about what that means. This is the same voice that would, in moments, command death itself to release its hold. He already knew what he was about to do. He knew Lazarus would walk out of that tomb alive within the hour. And still, he wept. Not because he didn't have hope, because he loved. Grief and power, standing in the same body at the same moment, neither one canceling out the other. The people watching said, "Behold how he loved him." Even they could see it plainly.
Right. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please tell me where you are watching from.
They came to the tomb, a cave, Scripture tells us, with a stone laid against the entrance, the standard burial practice of the time. Jesus said, "Take ye away the stone." And here Martha speaks again, and her words are painfully honest, the kind of honesty that only grief can produce. "Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days." It's an almost embarrassing thing to say out loud. Practical, physical, unflinching. 4 days in a Judean tomb. She isn't being dramatic. She's stating a fact her body and her nose already know. This is not a metaphor for death. This is the real, decaying, irreversible thing. Jesus' answer to her is gentle but firm. "Said I not unto thee that, if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God?" They took away the stone, and Jesus lifted his eyes and prayed, not a private prayer, but one spoken aloud, deliberately, for the crowd standing there to hear. "Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me." Every single thing that had happened, the delay, the tears, the grief, the waiting, had been leading to this one moment. Not for spectacle, so that everyone standing there, and everyone who would ever hear this story after them, would understand exactly who was speaking next. Imagine, for a moment, the inside of that tomb. 4 days of silence and stillness, and the particular darkness that only sealed stone can create. Whatever Lazarus' spirit had known in that space, Scripture doesn't tell us, and wisely so. Some mysteries are meant to stay mysteries, but then, breaking through however many feet of rock and however many days of death, a voice. Not a general command, not "the dead shall rise." Something far more personal, far more piercing. "Lazarus, come forth." His name. Spoken by the same voice that once calmed a storm on the Sea of Galilee with 3 words. The same voice that had said, days earlier, "I am the resurrection and the life." Now that voice reached into a place no voice should be able to reach, and called one man by name. And Scripture tells us what happened next in language almost too plain for what it describes. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. He came forth, still wrapped, still bound in the linen of his own burial, hopping or shuffling forward, unable to see clearly, unable to walk freely, alive but still dressed for death. It's one of the most striking images in the entire Bible. A resurrected man still tangled in the cloth of his grave, needing someone else to finish the work. Jesus said to those standing there, "Loose him and let him go." Someone had to step forward. Someone had to unwind the linen from his hands. Someone had to pull the napkin from his face and let him breathe open air for the first time in 4 days. The miracle was Christ's, but the unbinding, that final act of setting him fully free, was left to the hands of the people who loved him. We don't know what Lazarus said when the cloth came off his face. We don't know what he saw first. His sisters' faces, maybe, streaked with tears that had turned, in an instant, from grief to something almost too large for words. Scripture doesn't tell us because, in the end, this story was never really about Lazarus at all. It was about the one who called him. John tells us plainly what happened next. Many of the people who had come to comfort Mary, who saw this with their own eyes, believed in him. Word spread to Jerusalem quickly, so quickly in fact, that it became one of the very things that set in motion the events that would lead to the cross. The same power that called a dead man's name would not long after walk toward his own death and his own tomb. That is the strange and staggering shape of this story. Jesus wept at a grave he was about to empty. He grieved a death he was about to undo. And in doing both at once, fully human in his sorrow, fully divine in his power, he showed the people standing there, and every person who has read this account since, exactly who he claimed to be. I am the resurrection and the life. Not someday, not eventually. Then, there, on a dusty road outside a small village, to a grieving woman who needed to hear it before she ever saw the proof. Lazarus would die again one day. Scripture doesn't say when, but he was not made immortal that afternoon. What happened at that tomb was not an escape from death forever. It was a sign, a glimpse, proof spoken aloud for a crowd of witnesses of what Jesus would soon do permanently, for himself and for anyone who would believe. 4 days of silence, 2 words of grief, 1 name spoken into the dark, and a man who was dead walked out alive.